So my name is Paul English. I'm a software engineer and product designer. And I've been asked today to talk about one of my projects, which is a consumer advocacy website called Gethuman.com. You heard a little bit by Bill about what the site is all about. I'll tell you a little bit about how the site came to be. My mom passed away in April of 2001 and left me as a primary caretaker for my dad, who has early stage Alzheimer's. My dad was still actually in very good health, and in fact he was driving, which is a little bit scary, but he was very early stage Alzheimer's. And one of the first difficult things I had to do was to take his keys away. I actually stopped working for a while, and I took my dad's keys away and basically removed his ability to get around and to take initiative and to decide what he wanted to do for the day. And that was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. I have children. My children have been in and out of emergency rooms, but for some reason, taking my father's freedom away so that he couldn't drive around anymore was a very, very difficult thing for me. My father was a car guy, like I've also become a car guy. And then what happened is I started taking care of his finances, and there were little things about he would forget to pay the phone bill and the phone would get shut off, or he'd have a question about his bank account statement that came in. And what I realized is as my father started to get just a little bit of a speech impediment, his hearing wasn't so good as he got a little older, that he had a very difficult time making phone calls. He would call the local bank, a teller that he had known and banked at for many years, and he just had trouble finding that person. And what would happen increasingly is the people in the local banks, as the banks got rolled up and acquired and rolled up and acquired, they put them through not to the local bank, but to a central switchboard or central IVR, interactive voice response system. And the machine would come on and would talk to my father. My father sometimes thought he was talking to a human, didn't realize it was a machine, which maybe that was part of the design of these things. But he became very frustrated that they didn't understand him. And he knew that his speech was worsening a little bit, and he knew that his hearing was not so good as it used to be. And now that he couldn't drive anymore and couldn't get around, his wife had passed away, and he felt that he was a little bit of a burden on his children. Now he finds that he no longer can communicate with people, because many times when he would try to call someone to make a reservation or whatever it was he was trying to do, there just wasn't any way for him to communicate at all. And for me, this was very depressing, thinking about what we do to our seniors, and looking ahead for myself as I get into that, hopefully into the ages he reached, into my 80s. And the concept of taking away someone's car and freedom, losing your partner, and then taking away your ability to make telephone calls, it's a pretty lonely existence. And I started making all these phone calls for him, and I tried to make them with him so that he was still very involved in whatever it was we were trying to do together. But I think one time too many, I just, myself, in making these calls on behalf of my dad, could not get in touch with someone. I couldn't resolve his issue. So I have a blog. I've been blogging for, I guess, about 7 years, 6 or 7 years right now, going on 7 years. And I wrote a blog entry one day about how maddening this was, this drive to roll up businesses, do whatever you can to reduce costs, lay off people, put more machines in place, send things offshore, and how that it was taking out some of the dignity that we have as individuals and as consumers about what rights we have as consumers. And I wrote about the fact that you can pay your cell phone company or your cable TV company $100 a month, and they're happy to take your money, but they won't talk to you. The concept that your phone company wasn't there when you called was just kind of mind-boggling. If someone had told us 20 or 30 years ago that when you dialed 0, there wouldn't be someone there, or if you dialed 411, they're going to charge you for that, I don't think we would have believed it, but it's the, it's the boiling frog that slowly we get more and more of our dignity taken away. And after a while we wake up and we say, how do we let it get this bad? This is crazy, that you're paying someone money, and yet when you have a question, you just can't talk to anyone. So when I blogged about this, I started to get a big response. And I don't have a really popular blog, but I have a number of people that I've worked with in the past that read it, and I guess friends of theirs, whatever. And the blog posting started getting copied around the web. So I realized that this wasn't just me. It felt good for me to get the emails from a number of other people around the web who were also angry and hadn't done anything about it. So I did some research, and I found an article actually in the Journal, in the Wall Street Journal, that had talked about this problem recently and had listed phone numbers for, I think, about 10 major companies. And here's the phone number if you want to get someone in customer service. So I took that list and put it into a database and did a bunch of research and came up with a list of 100 companies, and actually manually went in myself and tried to find ways, either by searching on the web or finding, you get Dell computer, you're online with Dell for a long, long time, you finally get someone, and if you can have a sense of humor about it, you can sometimes convince that person to give you information to get to them more quickly. And so I started posting more and more of these tips online. And what happened is the website that I created, I took this off my blog, and I created a website which is called Gethuman.com. It basically took on a life of its own, where I no longer had to do any of the work, the community took it over. And I would get emails of the people who ran the site. I had a set of volunteers, mostly were senior citizens, that themselves were angry about this issue and who wanted to get involved in this fight to give back dignity to the consumer. So someone would email us and say, I'm a tech support rep, I work for Dell, I'm going to give you this secret number to call in. Don't tell anyone that I told you. And it was just great, because one of the nice things about the internet is you can't hide anymore. Companies can't hide. And not every company is going to hire an artist to come inside and to let people write about what's actually happening and do crazy things in terms of being totally transparent. They won't necessarily proactively do that, but the age of the internet forces us to do that, and it forces companies to do that. You can't have secret policies. Those policies get published. So to me, when I saw the web take this thing over and really push this hard, and we started seeing companies marketing that if you call them and dial, you will connect to a human, just dial 0. It felt good to me that the community had spoken and companies were starting to respond. Now, I'm a product designer, and one of the things that I have noticed over the years of building a few companies and doing product design is I found the best engineers I've ever hired and have worked with have two common traits. One is that they have empathy, that when they see a problem, they detect there's something wrong. And the second one is that they're lazy. And by lazy, what I mean is when you have an engineer who has something wrong with their car, the wipers don't work, whatever it is, the engineer is sick of doing something to keep fixing these, and the engineer will spend a huge amount of time trying to figure out what do I need to invent or do so I never have this problem again. Or on the web, a lot of people, the RTFM, read the fine manual. There's a lot of energy put into how do I make sure I never have to answer this question again? How do I make sure I fix this again? But the only time that works as a product designer is if you actually can see the problems, and if you actually talk to the people that are your customers or your potential customers. So I take quite seriously the movement that was created by this Gethuman project, where people said, we need dignity, we need the right to talk to people. And it occurred to me that by talking to people, rather than cost-cutting and trying to put machines in the way, but if you actually let your engineers talk directly to your customers, you might get something good out of this, and that you force that communication, and there's nowhere to hide, and the engineer has to fix that problem. So I run a travel company I started a few years ago, kayak.com. Started it with another guy, Steve Hafner, one of the Orbit's co-founders. And we are a very successful company. We'll do about 1 million consumer sessions today, as an example. I have 39 employees. Anytime we get an inquiry from a customer on the phone or by email or via the website, if you were to email us today or after the session, you'll get a personal reply, because I don't actually believe in automated systems for customer support. And you might say, how is it possible that you can have 39 employees and you can give personal answers to anyone who asks a question, even though this month we'll do 20 million user sessions on the site? And it's kind of a secret for Kayak, but it's a bit of a tautology that because I made a requirement from day one that we will answer every question, what that means is the engineers don't have time to write new software if they put a bug in the software and we got a lot of phone calls with it. So I think that by forcing us to directly communicate with the customers and actually taking me out of the loop and having the engineers talk directly to the customers, it has helped my business a lot in making sure that the engineers who are empathetic and don't like having customers scream at them saying, you ruined my honeymoon, the trip, I booked this flight and the flight wasn't available, or they have that empathy, but they're also lazy and they don't want to answer the same question 100 times a day. So what the engineers tend to do is they fix the products. Now at Dell Computer, for example, I don't mean to make fun of Dell too much here. I sort of a love-hate relationship with them. I own a number of Dell computers, but their customer support, I think, has been a big problem, and a lot of people have that experience. I wrote in my blog a couple years ago that I thought Dell Computer was in a customer service death spiral. And what I meant is, if you looked at the number of layers of organization that Dell had between the person who answered the phone, or between the customer who's trying to get a problem solved, and the engineer that designed that disk drive that melts, or whatever the problem is, the network interface card that the driver doesn't work when you upgrade the latest version of Windows, and therefore you lose access to the internet. I counted about 7 layers of communication between the customer who has the problem and the programmer somewhere, a hardware designer somewhere at Dell who could fix that problem. And I think by adding more and more layers, what happens to a company is it's focused on how do you do it efficiently and how do you cost save. So how do you build websites which try to answer questions, computers which try to answer questions. Let's lay off people in the US, move all the call centers offshore, do whatever I can to remove costs, add layers, add layers. What happens is those engineers go home at 5 o'clock because they're not feeling the heat, they're not feeling the pressure, and they don't have the accountability of talking directly to the customer to try to figure out how can I fix this problem as soon as it's introduced, as opposed to just waiting till it goes through 7 or 8 layers of management and up from the IVR or the web system to the customer support rep to the manager to the quality assurance department and on and on. When the problems no longer are empathy to a human who has an actual problem to solve, but it just becomes a feature on a bug list that someone then gets assigned to work on. It's just not the same level of urgency. So anyway, the Gethuman project that was started a couple of years ago is all about how do you restore that dignity as a consumer and as a human, that you should have the right to talk to someone, particularly if you're paying that company money, if you're a paying customer. So I would just encourage each of you that if you are having a difficult time and a company that you do business with is not allowing you to speak to them, you have the right to do that, and I would just say make your complaint known and switch companies. And I think that as a group, if we can demand that companies actually talk to us and allow us to communicate with them, the right thing will happen. So that's it. Thank you.